Hi, everyone. Today we are here with Jake Griffith and Samantha Baker from Neel Robinson Stafford. And today we are talking about joint tenancy, right of survivorship versus tenants in common. Okay, Jake, a lot of people don't know the difference between these two types of ownership. So what is the different forms of ownership that a buyer could choose from?
So the two most common forms of ownership in Georgia are going to be either the joint tenants with the rights of survivorship or holding the property and title as tenants in common.
So what's the significance or benefit of holding joint tenants with right of survivorship?
So the joint tenancy with the right of survivorship is a type of concurrent estate in which the joint owners of the property have a right of survivorship. And so that means that if one owner dies, that owner's interest in the property will automatically pass to the remaining owner or owners, the one that or all of them that are surviving, on the death of one of the tenants. That means the whole of the property passes through the remaining surviving tenants, and that is known as this right of survivorship.
So if a married couple, what do you recommend for married couples? And
So
is it just married couples? It could be
right.
any more than one person owning a property, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So anybody can hold these titles to the properties, either as joint tenants or tenants in common. For a married couple, I would suggest holding as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. And a lot of that comes into play too upon the untimely passing of one of them. And I think that that adds a lot of benefit there. It's one less worry that those families have to worry about, or potential kids having to probate estates and whatnot.
So if a couple owns a property, and because joint tenants right of survivorship, how long has that been around?
For the length of time, I mean, it's been around since property rights were created.
But it wasn't as common in the earlier.
That's correct. So nowadays, joint tenants with rights of survivorship, that's more of a default setting. However, 20, 30 plus years ago, it was this tenants in common. And so basically what that meant is that if somebody passes away as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, there's no need to probate the estate as far as the title to that specific property is concerned.
Okay.
However, if there were tenants in common, that might trigger a probate situation where the estate would have to go through that probate process.
Okay. So if a couple owns a property and they look back at their deed, and they've lived in their home for a really long time, and they look back at their deed and it's tenants in common, how hard or easy is it to switch to joint tenants and right of survivorship?
It's extremely simple. We would just draft a quick deed in our office for them, just conveying the property from themselves or from those who own the property into themselves again, except for we would add that specific language that's required, and that would be the joint tenants with rights of survivorship.
Okay, excellent. So I think we answered maybe another question that I was going to ask you, which is if a deceased person owns interest in the property, would the estate need to be probated?
So in this situation, the deceased tenant's property interest would simply evaporate by operation of law. It cannot be inherited by their heirs, which means it avoids going through that probate process. And under this type of ownership, the last owner living would take all of the interest in the property.
And does anything have to happen to make that happen? Or is just the fact that the person's deceased and this ownership, joint tenancy right of survivorship is in place?
Just by virtue of that owner's passing. And so at closing, we would simply just ask for proof that they have in fact passed away. So a lot of times it's in the form of a death certificate that we'd require.
Gotcha. So what's the significance or benefit in title of owning tenants in common title?
Well, so tenants in common is basically exactly how it sounds. It's basically the each owner, or if there are multiple owners, they're all owners in common. So they own their own separate shares of the property. A lot of time, this is really common. Titles held in this sense really common when you're not married or somebody, relatives own a piece of property together and they own it in different shares. You can own it different percentages. Somebody can own 1%, somebody can own 50%, somebody can own the remaining 49%. So that's the benefit of tenants in common, basically.
Okay, so do tenants in common have the same right to ownership meaning?
No. So tenants in common, you have no survivorship meaning, which basically is if one of the owners dies, the owner's interest to the property will automatically pass on into the owner's heirs or devisees, and you more than likely would have to probate the will or by intestate succession.
Okay. So this is great information. So if a couple is purchasing a home together and they want ownership to pass easy from one to the other, should one person pass away before the other, then joint tenants' right of survivorship would be the preferred form of ownership. And if multiple people own a property, then possibly tenants in common would be the preferred method of ownership. But that if someone in that group of owners should pass, it would pass to their heirs, and it might possibly have to be probated, where a joint tenancy right of survivorship avoids probate. Correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys for this information. This is very helpful. A lot of times people don't know the difference between the different types of ownership and what impact it can have should someone pass away or ownership, their situation pass away. So, all right. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for watching The Lowdown with the local market experts. You can find us online at lauramilleredwards.com, on Instagram at LME Realty, and on Facebook at LME Realty Group.